Hey everyone, welcome back to the Chain Reaction Podcast. I'm your host, Tom Shaughnessy. This is the official podcast of Delphi Digital, an independent research boutique providing institutional grade analysis on the digital asset market. If you're not on our mailing list, visit delphidigital.io and add yourself right now. Today I'm thrilled to release our first video roundtable, which is also being distributed as an audio-only file to our podcast channel. I was joined by some very smart and fun guests, including Gregory Rocco of Consensus's Alpine Group, Tanner Hoban of Consensus Digital Securities, and Sam Corso, who runs TechSuite and is an advisor to Delphi Digital. This is a candid and conversational episode, and we cover a lot of ground, hitting on numerous relevant and contentious topics in crypto and blockchain. Crypto is very technical, so we tried to mix it up and make this a very conversational and fun episode. I hope you enjoy the episode, and if you do, share it with your friends. With that, here's our conversation. Hey everyone, welcome back to the podcast. Today I have an in-person episode with Sam Corso of TechSuite over there. Not sure if you can see him yet. Gregory Rocco of Alpine and Tanner Hoban of Consensus Digital Securities. First time we're doing this. It's going to be a live roundtable. Well, not live, it's recorded, but it's the first one we're doing in person. We're doing it with video, and it's a roundtable about crypto. So why don't we start with everybody introducing yourself and how you got started in crypto. Sam?
Sure. Yeah. So about 3 years ago, I started a software development agency here in New York called TechSuite. We've been working mainly with seed and other early stage startups on building out MVPs and then helping them to scale out. About a year and a half ago, in like mid to late 2017, there was a lot of interest in the blockchain realm. We worked on some tokens. We worked on an algorithmic trading bot and some other stuff, and I just really got deeply interested in the space.
How about you, Rocco?
My journey started working in the space 2016, 2017. I worked at a company called InvestFeed, became their editor-in-chief, started writing for a couple publications like CCN, Bitcoinist. Worked with a couple startups on communication strategy, eventually fell into mechanism design and joined Token Foundry because a friend of mine was working on the mechanism design team there. And now members of that team have formed Alpine under Consensus.
Absolutely. Tanner, what about you?
About 3-4 years ago, I was working on a trading desk and I was market making closed-end funds. And this was at the time when Bitcoin was sort of making its first rocket upwards to about 1,400. And I wanted to really learn how to market make. It was my first time on the desk, and I really wanted to gain skills in terms of more on the supply side and more on the bid side. So what I ended up doing is I purchased some Bitcoin in 2014, and I used that Bitcoin to market make Dogecoin, and that's how I first got my foot in the door with the crypto land. Eventually went to equity research, wrote pretty extensively on the topic, about a 70-page paper on the topic. It's very complementary to our cybersecurity industry at the time, and from then I moved on to Consensus Digital Securities, where we're facilitating digital security transactions.
Fun fact, me and Tanner worked 2 floors above this. We're recording in FiDi right now at Oppenheimer for 2 years together, and now we're down the crypto rabbit hole. So let's get started. First topic, what's the point of crypto? Lob pitch. Who wants to start? What are we trying to solve? What's the goal? Rocco.
I guess I'll start. I guess for me, the one use case that always stands out all the time will always be that kind of self-sovereign digital gold store value thesis that kind of Bitcoin promotes. Curious about kind of that universal backend, world computer vision that Ethereum has. Still working through it. Slowly being convinced day by day, but for me, that kind of backbone for the entire experiment, so to speak, has been that digital gold store value that Bitcoin has been since it started.
Totally agree. Well, who wants to take the beyond Bitcoin? What about Ethereum? What are we trying to do with smart contract platforms? What's the goal here?
Yeah, I mean, at least for me, I think about it, very simply is like, trust minimization and reducing like the cost of settlement or even, taking it a step further. Like I think of Ethereum almost like a verification layer, right? So like we have this internet stack and there's all these different layers. And I just think of, not necessarily that it has to be Ethereum, but, whatever it is, as, again, like this verification layer to the internet and being able to reduce trust and reduce the cost of settlement. That's really what I think about it as.
Makes a lot of sense. So a lot of people say that we have to have Bitcoin or Ethereum. I'm of the opinion that we could have both. Anybody disagree? Agree? What do you think?
I mean,
shoot, Tim. Here we go.
Going back to your previous question, I think what we're ultimately trying to solve, or at least what's the largest value of blockchain in itself, is the cybersecurity component of it. I think it solves a lot of issues. There's a reason why we have self-driving cars before we have electronic voting. It's because computers were, in essence, made for data duplication, and preventing data from duplicating multiple times has always been a cybersecurity challenge. And it's just a cybersecurity paradox that I think blockchain is now trying to solve. I mean, to answer your second question on that is I see a lot of value in Ethereum and smart contracts for solving that, and the store value aspect. I think it is valuable, but I don't think necessarily Bitcoin is sustainable at its current model, primarily because of the environmental impact that it has, and it's just not a longer term sustainable model, at least in my opinion.
Got it. But going back to whether or not it is sustainable, let's say Ethereum and Bitcoin are both sustainable, no issues. Let's just say, can we have a digital gold store value payment transfer platform, and can we have a smart contract platform?
Yes, absolutely.
And definitely agree with the multi-chain theory. Honestly, I don't think it has to be kind of one to rule them all. And at the end of the day, a lot of this stuff kind of boils down to fun science experiments. I usually refer to them as all like petri dishes.
Yeah,
we're gonna get into your science experiments soon.
I mean, I think you just said it. Like they're just for two different things, and because they're two different things, I don't see why they can't coexist.
Yeah, agreed.
And that's what I like about having Ethereum around, especially, is that Bitcoin can have its goal of being this kind of self-sovereign digital store value, but if you want to do these kind of like program automation, that settlement layer, you can have Ethereum for that.
So there's a lot of arguments against forking and evolution. The idea is that you could fork Bitcoin, create Litecoin, Bitcoin Cash, whatever you want, or you could evolve the network, like Tezos could evolve on chain, whatever. There's a third option, I think that's less talked about, is that the areas that aren't filled by one platform like Bitcoin lead developers to create a new platform. Just another way to evolve. What do you guys think about that? Or just crypto evolution in general? Do you think we need a lot of forks? Do you think they serve a purpose? How do you think evolution goes? I know you've done a lot here, Rocco, but I know Tanner's got his opinions.
Listen, the best thing I ever heard was it was Ricardo Spadney, I think, in January of 2017, or 2018, the euphoria time when the market was at its top. And he was giving a presentation on Monero, and especially Monero's history of being a fork. If you don't like something, fork off. It's like the best thing I've ever heard. And the thing is, if you can manage to have social consensus follow you and the money follow you, if your ideology is the better ideology than what you forked off previously, that's it. One. But I love the idea of forking because it introduces a variable. Have this parallel timeline, this parallel universe where this other thing that is what wasn't in the previous chain is now enacted in this new chain, and you could see whether or not people wish to follow it. And everyone can or cannot, depending on how they feel.
You're testing the changes in the wild.
Okay, completely. That's exactly why Monero succeeded against BitMonero, because the social consensus and money followed Monero.
Do you think that multiple forks in a network could lead to a split in the network effect? So it would dilute both networks?
I think eventually it will dilute initially, but eventually I think you'll have, I think most of the time, if not all the time, you'll have eventually one winner out of splits. You can have some like edge cases where two networks can exist simultaneously. Like the Ethereum Classic community is still building on it. You still have a lot of interest there alongside Ethereum, and there's been nice initiatives like Orly Testnet that have been kind of bridging the gap between both chains. And they can kind of exist peacefully and do their own thing. But in the cases of like pure attacks, or I guess like strong, more recent times like Bitcoin Cash, for example, I could see in the future, a little more contentious. I see Bitcoin Cash just like fading into obscurity eventually.
So what happens? So layer 1 can fork. We get that. Bitcoin, Ethereum can fork. What happens to the layer 2 dApps and smart contracts and everything built on top when the consensus layer gets forked? What happens to all those network effects?
That's interesting to think about, right? Yeah, I'm not sure. I don't know if I have the answer on that. I mean, even we were talking about layer 1, and it's like there's so much uncertainty there.
I guess it's a hypothetical because it hasn't happened yet.
Right.
But let's say Ethereum forks. What happens to MakerDAO?
That's exactly the big thing, is like, where does it go? The smaller example that we have to play around with was when the DAO happened. What exchanges wanted the tokens to remain on which chain? If the exchanges did have some power back then in saying like, hey, we're going to accept the Ethereum flavor of your token, not the Ethereum Classic flavor of your token, because when the split happened, the tokens existed on both chains too. So the exchanges dictated there, but now we've entered past the tokens for the sake of payments into more of these complex applications. So like we have Augur. Now, if Ethereum splits, now we have Augur and Augur Prime on this new split. We have Maker and Maker Prime on this new split. That's, I think, I
think it's going to be hard for real-world assets. We can't tokenize a building and have it exist on 2 chains.
Yeah.
Can't do it.
I agree.
Yeah. I don't think that's going to make sense. But back to evolution, how do we decide a winner between Ethereum and its competitors? Tezos, EOS, take your flavor. Is it the one that evolves the fastest? Is it the one that attracts the most developers? What's the metric?
It's attracting the most developers. Network effect is everything. The amount of tools that are being built on the network there's over a million people that have downloaded Truffle.
Yeah.
And that's huge. That goes a long way. I mean, that's exponentially more than any of the other networks. And I think that's what ultimately is going to drive them winning longer term.
Yeah. You're a developer. Would you switch to other platforms, Sam?
I mean, I can tell you what drew me to Ethereum was the community and the resources available. I haven't even looked that much elsewhere because it's kind of kept me in one place, and there's just so much of a community, and again, like the documentation and the availability to get help when I need help, that kind of stuff is really important.
Yeah.
And it's kind of just drawn me and kept me with Ethereum. To your question though, on the flip side, I also think that it's at least in my opinion, it's kind of obvious which ones are going to die first. I think that, me personally, I think that like things like EOS are just garbage, and I think that I'm just being honest.
I agree with that.
And I think like when you look at like garbage like that, it's pretty obvious that stuff. At least I would hope, in a rational sense, that stuff would be gone first. But as for who's going to win, I think that's a more complex question.
I have a question. Why do you think it's garbage, though?
I mean,
where do you think it went wrong in its entire life cycle?
Probably a mistake.
Yeah, the consensus is.
Let's try it again.
They'll never fix cartels. They'll never solve it because you can't change that.
Yeah, so the consensus mechanism.
Yeah, I tweet about this all the time. Like the consensus mechanism to me is the most interesting part of any blockchain, and when you have a really flawed one as your consensus mechanism, it just turns me off. And
so why is EOS still here? I mean, is it the millions of dollars that we're paying those validators every year? What is it?
The thing is, the beauty of EOS is that, and someone said this recently, I wish I could figure out the name, it's escaping me, but is that the interesting thing about its ICO is that it was an efficient price discovery mechanism because it was held over a year. And the fact that it was also trading while it was still being sold, is that the market was able to efficiently price it over that long period of time.
That's interesting because it doesn't happen in real stocks. It's never traded before the IPO is set, right?
Yeah. And that's a very strange thing to think about. Yes, the thing is, the experiment's been tried again and again. You have BitShares, you have Steam, you have Lisk, you have Arc, and you have now EOS. And the problem is, I think it was even there was an exchange. Was it Wobi that like documents leaked that there were issues with cartels like immediately because
Wobi, like HU.
Yeah. That cartels were already forming. But I mean, listen, like it's got a community to keep it alive. Like I'm glad to see it do its thing because again, going all the way back to Petri dish thing, like if EOS manages to do something efficiently that someone else doesn't, and someone wants to adopt what they've done, I'll let them play in their sandbox. This kind of thing.
So where do we draw the line between what chains we think should survive and which we shouldn't. I'll give you an example for me. I'm not a fan of Ethereum Classic at all, but my opinion is that it's not my decision on whether or not to keep it. It should survive because it's a free market. And I think that some people want some of these chains to die, and that kind of like centralizes blockchains in a way. It's kind of like what we all are against. So how do we decide here, or do we not have to decide?
I mean, I'm for it being in the free market, but I mean, I don't really see much value out of it. I mean, you can probably port over some applications over it, but the thing is, it doesn't have that network effect that I was describing earlier. We'll describe everything and ultimately give it its value.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I mean, the related thing is the security, right? So, like, with these chains that like are becoming less relevant, and of course, we can say let the market decide. But like, I think the market is going to realize like why would I build anything meaningful on a chain that's inherently insecure? And I think that that's going to draw a lot of people away.
Yeah, if you're a project manager and you're saying I need to build this application on a chain, like you evaluate all the chains and you say which one is going to last the longest. Are you going to choose Ethereum Classic where there's essentially no applications or developers, or would you choose something like Ethereum where millions of people are downloading and creating infrastructure on it?
Got it. So, Tanner, I guess a question for you. How much do you think Ethereum Classic has a religious following to keep it going? And how much do you think of it as actually a real technological view that this was immutable the whole time?
Well,
because I get a religious feel from a lot of blockchains.
Yeah, I mean, it's true. I mean, it's a hobby. It comes down to it being just a fun thing to work with. So, to your point, yeah, it could be religious. Could be they just have stuck with it for the past, year and a half, or they just hold Ethereum Classic tokens and they're biased that way. So I think that does add a lot of the bias in our ecosystem.
Yeah.
I could definitely appreciate the one thing, though, if they remain proof of work as Ethereum transitions to proof of stake, just to kind of have that retention there on their end. If there are people who still favor proof of work developing on Ethereum, you might see a weird network effect of people come over to Ethereum Classic simply because it's still going to remain a proof of work chain, but the governance keeping it as a proof of work chain.
I think it was Stephen McKee from Momentum said that once Ethereum transfers to proof of stake, Ethereum Classic is a great network for all those miners to go to make for an easy transition.
Exactly, and I personally think that you'll see the hash rate of Ethereum be distributed pretty nicely between Bitcoin and Ethereum Classic. I don't think you'll see a meaningful fork come out of the transition to Ethereum 2.0. What I honestly think you'll see is a split.
But that's just miners. That's only one component of the network.
Oh, yeah, don't get me wrong. I'm just saying this is purely on the mining.
Yeah, that's just money making without any value adding, right? It's adding security to it, yes. Yeah. But it's not adding the value of the network.
That's what I'm saying. Well, once the security goes up, you might have more interest in someone remaining on that chain.
Are you reluctant of proof of stake?
A little bit. I don't think that you've had a meaningful implementation with an efficient slashing mechanism in the wild yet. So I'm still a little skeptical. I don't mind proof of stake. I'd like it again as an experiment. But for now, to me, proof of work is tried and true. And provides also an efficient mechanism to kind of kill off chains, so to speak. We're talking
slashing mechanism or just the economics of slashing?
Oh, like a slashing mechanism. Okay. Yeah. That's all. Listen, I'm not going to bash proof of stake at all. I want to see it succeed, but I'm just skeptical until the mechanism's been kind of in the wild.
Do we the whole space is moving towards proof of stake? Do we actually need it?
I had this conversation that it is an incredible way to bootstrap a chain for security. The overhead cost is very low, and you could have enough people interested in the actual economics behind it and mechanism behind it to actually start the network. Whereas something like the only reason why Grin has been successful so far is because you had all those SPVs and initial interest to bootstrap the network with all the mining power. Whereas with proof of stake network, it's a lot easier. You could bootstrap it a lot quicker with fewer participants who have it eventually grow over time. So it's an incredible way to, if you want to start a nascent chain that you have this idea where X, Y, and Z might succeed if you put it in a blockchain, but no one's really tried it yet, and you want that bootstrap security, I think it's an easy way to kind of start it off like that.
Makes a lot of sense. So with proof of stake, the token holders are now the ones validating the network. Bitcoin's a little bit different where the miners don't have to own tokens. They could be two separate parties from the token holders. So it's like a different solution to the principal agent problem. What does that actually mean for the network, though? I mean, does Bitcoin benefit from having two separate parties here, ones that own tokens and then the miners? Whereas in proof of stake with Ethereum, the people holding the tokens are the ones that are securing the network. Do you guys see any issues with that, or?
Well, the miners, or at least a smart miner, would sell his tokens immediately for proof of work. That's the only way to really know and generate a profitability. At least,
but it keeps them separate though. You have miners on one side who don't have to own tokens,
right? And
you have token holders in Bitcoin that own tokens.
Well,
in proof of stake,
you can be a node without tokens and still validate transactions.
Good point.
As you're on a full node, you're still participating in the governance of Bitcoin.
Good point. Good point.
Because you're always validating, even with a full node with an empty wallet.
That makes a lot of sense. So there's three parties. We have token holders, miners, then the nodes, obviously.
I don't think that I guess token holders to the extent of like affecting markets, but not in terms of governance decisions or actually validating the network. Whereas in a proof of stake system, it would be the token holders who are effectively validating and staking.
Got it. That makes sense. So nice segue into, I don't know how you guys, up to speed you guys are on Decred.
I was about to say, yeah.
Yeah. So the cool thing about Decred is you download their wallet, Decredition, have your tokens. You can literally vote on a proposal to change the consensus or vote on plenty of votes that use the treasury of the network. Really cool, really easy to do. But they still have the proof of work component where miners have to actually run the software and implement change as well. It's not pure token governance to change consensus models. So I guess my question for you guys is, what do you think about on-chain governance?
I thought we were going to go into the hybrid model first.
Oh yeah. Let's go to hybrid first.
That is like the one. Yeah. That is the one thing in Decred that is like absolutely fascinating to me, because you have miners with sinks and sources who secure the network, and then you have stakers who are validating that and keeping checks on the actual miners. And to actually effectively compromise the network, you not only need the hash power, but you also need the staking power.
You also have to get lucky.
Yeah.
You have to. So Decred has proof of work and proof of stake. You need to. Proof of work miners have to validate the block, but proof of stakers have to buy tickets. Then you have to get lucky enough to be the one voting on that block. It's extremely hard to attack. But the issue with Decred is the market cap is small. It's not the market cap of Bitcoin. So in theory, it's harder to attack, but in economic value, I don't think it is.
Yeah, I mean the hybrid model is the most interesting part to me too. I think it's interesting to see, and I think that at least for the next 2-3 years until we've seen like POS out in the wild, I think that that's like the most interesting model to me. But you also brought up the on-chain governance. I think it's just an interesting experiment. There's definitely a lot of things about it that concern me in terms of gaming it, but like I think it's an interesting experiment.
All right, I'll take the devil's advocate here. If Ethereum had on-chain governance, in my opinion, we would not have all this confusion surrounding timelines and what's going on. And I think it's a mess that's delayed Ethereum's growth. If we had on-chain governance, I feel like we could have voted on what proposal we wanted, what we researched, and things would have moved faster. What do you guys think Ethereum would look like if we had on-chain governance? This is a tough one.
You're the master. I feel like you're the master technical guy.
You're the master governance guy.
Oh,
especially after your futarchy paper, Rocco.
Yeah. No. We got Sam also very technical. I'm more economic, I would say.
He's the governance guy.
Yeah, you're governance.
My next question will go to Sam.
I'm still stuck on-chain governance. I like it. I talked to my colleague Jacob a lot about like training wheels for a network. Like you start centralized, eventually decentralized over time. The kind of cacophony of Bitcoin is that it's like kind of a free for all, and that only the most conservative operates pass, and that's fine. But on-chain seems to be more efficient. But I'm always wondering about like the buying and plutocracy in on-chain systems. Again, I want to watch them develop. It's not like I hate the absolutism of like this thing has to fail in order for this to succeed. I think they could all just kind of exist, but I want to see what works well to eventually adopt somewhere else.
Well, I don't really get, there's a huge argument in space between Ethereum and Tezos because Tezos is on-chain governance, Ethereum doesn't, but I just don't get it. Like, you're formalizing the process of voting upgrades, but that doesn't mean people still can't meet in communities and conference rooms and talk about changes before they vote in an off-chain manner. So to me, it's not like a...
Well, it's asset-driven. The other is signaling. That's the big thing. It's like you're choosing what software to run rather than being asset-driven and buying your voting power.
Got it. What's the difference? The speed to implement an upgrade?
Price. It's the price, man. It's I could the beauty of like the whole like don't compromise on trustlessness. If I could run a full node, I could participate in governance. Is that I could choose which software to run, which implementation to run. If I'm not financial, I don't have finance to really purchase enough power to really vote on something, and have enough weight to a vote, that's where it gets complicated. But that's also what I like about Decred, though, especially because I think you can get a tenth of a ticket.
Yeah, there's ticket splitting now.
Yeah, and also you have to. It's not just you buy Decred and you can magically vote on everything in Paldea. You have to actually stake and earn your tickets first. You have to work for the network before you even have a stake.
Also, the proof of work miners in Decred have to validate the blocks and run the change software.
Yeah.
So it's a mix between Bitcoin and Tezos.
I always come back to Decred with that as a interesting.
It's so cool.
Really well thought out. But the main thing with off-chain, on-chain becomes this: do you choose the software or do you have the assets actually?
I think you made a good point earlier, Rocco, when you said that starting off centralized and then later meet that decentralization that would achieve the security of the network. Well, I like to look at networks in terms of multiple different types of decentralization. Actually just published a Medium article on this earlier this morning.
What's the link?
But it's so there's three types. There's logical, which every blockchain is logically centralized. There's architectural, which is basically the number of nodes in the network, which I believe the number of nodes is very key to having a blockchain network. Then there's political centralization. I think it could either be good or bad. When we're looking at a political centralized network like XRP that holds a ton of the tokens.
Don't get me started on XRP.
Then that could be very deleterious to an actual network. Whereas if you have a evangelist that is helping build out the network effects, that's giving the network a vision and basically directing developers, say, hey, we should really work on some protocol here to help scale the network and make it more secure. I think that's actually very beneficial to have centralization in the network.
Yeah. I think that centralization really helps early on in small networks. And the relevant example is Beam versus Grin. Beam launched backed by a centralized company. Grin did not. I honestly thought Grin would work because it's open source. But with these smaller networks, you need somebody making the decisions. But I don't think that they'll ever be able to decentralize over time. I just think it's too hard. When do you decide when we're not having a leader anymore?
And that's I always like to talk about decentralization as the actual end itself. Like someone I think of, my crypto CEO Taylor
Monahan?
Yeah, recently tweeted stop selling decentralization. You could sell like the means of that end, so like censorship resistance and the ability, whatever it is, but stop selling decentralization. So honestly, like what we're talking about now, like centralization might be a key way to bootstrap a network and start a network. Like even look at the recent Zcash vulnerability. The reason why they were able to contain it so well was the fact that it was, the leaders, so to speak, were notified, were able to figure out the fix for it and then put it into Sapling. And Sapling came out and was the upgrade. What would happen in a decentralized network, so to speak, quote unquote decentralized? There's a reason why the Zcash founders only told Horizon, formerly Zencash, and Komodo, because they thought as leaders, decentralized parties, that those were the two, well thought out, I guess, like professional quote unquote projects. Like they didn't tell Bitcoin Private, they didn't tell Z Classic, because if they told them, they probably would have thought they'd spread the vulnerability around. And
they could take advantage of it.
Exactly.
Right. Yeah.
So those decisions and the way they handled that error, like it was fixed. I mean, there's still plenty of verification issues with like figuring out whether or not it was exploited. But the way they were able to contain it can be seen as a positive, that it was started as a foundation, started centralized, and will decentralize over time.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Do you think there's a peak from an architectural decentralization standpoint?
Like looking at like what is the most decentralized?
No, I'm saying, is there a moment where adding another node on the network actually is detrimental to the network? It doesn't provide a marginal utility value.
I think it depends on the use case, right?
Let's say Bitcoin. Let's say you hit your 2 millionth node on Bitcoin.
Oh, I think the more nodes, the better. There was a great article from Stop and Decrypt that Bitcoin is like an impenetrable fortress of validation. So the more nodes and the more validation you have on a transaction, the more it adheres to the rules and the more people enforcing that, the stronger the network.
So if you add one more node, so you're now 2 million and one nodes. But the environmental impact that has.
Well, they're not mining. You're talking about mining? Well, mining and nodes, because I can run a full node, it's just my computer.
Sure. All right. Well, let's say mining.
Okay.
Do you think that is a net negative marginal utility value?
I guess the easier question here is, what's the point of using electricity for nodes 1,001?
Yeah, so the value of adding that decentralization after the 2 million, is there really that much value where now you're actually, you're adding, you're kind of impacting the environment because you're adding so much electricity to it. The hash rate of the Bitcoin network has increased over 150% for the past 4 years.
I'd argue there's no point in having a certain number of nodes after a certain point. I don't know what that point is.
I think we just got to separate between mining nodes and full nodes.
Yeah.
Because for me, like the more
Mining
full nodes, the better, right?
So, okay, yeah. Full nodes is great.
Yeah.
But mining nodes, though. Is there a peak that you can hit where you reach a marginal utility that's a negative value?
I'm going to push back and just say more nodes the better in terms of validation, the more mining the better in terms of security, especially for a network like Bitcoin. And I think that's a more interesting distinction to talk about in terms of like stake networks and validation. Like how many people staking and validating do we have that kind of, or almost philosophically in terms of decentralization. But I think still, I don't think I'm going to move on that one.
I think everything has a utility value. I don't know if you've ever seen what a utility curve looks like. It just looks like a bell curve. Basically, if you have an X amount of something, eventually the next new one of those that you have, it will go down in the utility value sense. So if you have too much water, for instance, you drink water 8 cups a day, you're probably hitting your peak. After that, you start diluting your sodium.
Well, maybe
maybe
that gets into the security of Bitcoin is that it's vague, is that the point isn't chosen. So we can have as many nodes as we want or as little as we want, but nobody knows how many it is. Because if you set a point at 1 million nodes or whatever number of mining nodes, people know exactly how much it would cost to attack the network. Right. If it changes over time, it's always changing.
I guess what I'm trying to get at here is that there is a peak eventually. There is a value that we can't really quantify, that the maximum amount of utility value of nodes versus the amount of impact that it has, from an environmental standpoint, et cetera, we might be over that. But it seems like you're saying that the more you go up, the more beneficial it is. Which I don't think there's really anything in the world where the more you go up.
In terms of a digital gold store value standpoint, I will not be happy until even multiple colluding nation states can take down the network. Can't take down the network. I'm sorry. Thank you. Can't take down the network. And that's just, regardless, that's just like the crazy philosophy I have just to keep this network as secure as possible for the future. But there are certain costs associated with it, like environmental costs, and we might be able to model that in the future. But I think for now, it's mostly just keep this thing as...
Well, the hash rate's gone up, like I said, over 150%.
So with proof of stake, you have a percentage. You could never have 100% of the network stake because you need coins to use. But you can have 50% of the network staked. So you have a percentage on what the security can be as a percentage of the market cap. With Bitcoin, you can just keep having mining nodes sign on forever. So I think proof of stake kind of implements a bar here that you're kind of looking for with proof of work. Because with proof of stake, you can say, okay, 25% stake, it might not be that secure. 50%, we're fine. Anything over that, we don't need. With Bitcoin, you have no idea what the number of nodes is to maintain security. You can only assume.
Right. And what
it's playing into the basic game theoretics of keep it growing.
But the problem with proof of work is, especially ASIC-based proof of work, is that it's an economies of scale business. So over time, margins are going to diminish down to a point where it's next to none, and the only way to really gain on the network is to buy in bulk. Now we're at a point where it's not profitable to mine on the Bitcoin network unless you implement some form of renewable energy. So you have to buy solar panels, which can be
a huge sunk cost.
It's like $5 per watt, if I recall correctly. But if you wanted to be, one mining node on the Bitcoin network, I think I've done the math here. The minimal amount of dollars you need to spend is about $7,000.
Wow.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, we're talking about it.
And that's going to increase over time. I mean, eventually, when you buy in bulk from a solar panel standpoint, the dollar value of that watt per watt goes down significantly. We're eventually going to keep squeezing those margins until the initial cost to acquire and become a node is going to keep going up and up and up and up. It's an economies of scale.
Yeah, you got to think about it from the perspective of the node operator, I think, just as much as you do, like, in a general sense. And just like, I think that the more mining nodes we have, and it's going to become difficult for more people to even want to be operating a mining node because they're just getting squeezed out.
So at some point, let's call it 5 years in the future, the hash rate keeps increasing. Margins are continuing to diminish.
Right.
It's possible that we could have 50 very, very large mining nodes on the network, just throw a random number out there because of the economies of scale.
But I guess the circle back here though is, does that really matter if we have 10,000 fully validated nodes around the world also securing the network? Because if nodes implement their own software, then that can fork the network. But if they're all implementing the same software, that also protects the network. It's not just the miners. Rocco's the one that explained this one to me, everyone.
Yeah, you not only need hash rate, but you also need people validating rules.
Yeah.
So it's a combination of both.
Yeah.
So what happens tomorrow if there's Grin to mine on or another coin that's just so economically attractive to mine?
That's the beauty of proof of work. If something becomes, scales harder and becomes more profitable, then hash rate will shift there.
Got it. Makes a lot of sense. I want to know the one coin other than the ones we mentioned you guys shouldn't think exist. It has to be in the top 25 or the top 10.
XRP.
Yeah, we sold mine.
I agree on XRP.
XRP.
All right. All right. Next. All right. XRP's gone. All right.
For the record, I like Ripple as a company a lot.
Me too. That's my tagline. Love Ripple, hate XRP.
Let's look at the top 25. Hold on. There's got to be other ones that.
Oh, shoot.
XRP is too easy.
XRP is way too
That's
easy.
an easy one.
Tron. Wait, hold on. Let's go down the list. Okay, we got Bitcoin.
I feel like I like the store value play a lot.
This is merely like exist or not, should exist or not exist.
Okay, how about should Bitcoin exist in 10 years? That's a better question.
I don't think it will.
I agree that I am unsure of whether it will.
Unless it moves to a more environmentally friendly model.
Not even the environmental model. I don't understand the cap. It's the biggest selling point. It's the biggest selling point of Bitcoin. And everybody tells me on Twitter, I would never want to know that it changes the cap. But the point is, it's not your decision. If miners aren't securing the network through block wars and transaction fee doesn't make up for it, you're running your node on a network that won't be validating blocks.
I think it's the monetary certainty thing. That it's like they know it will always be forever.
But until you get to that cap, or until you get close.
I am absolutely fascinated to see what will happen when block wars run out.
But we can't wonder on what's going to happen. Like, why would we want to invest in a question?
What year is it expected to?
2141.
2141.
That's far away.
Yeah, 10 years.
It's so far away.
It is very far away.
I mean, I keep going back to it, but just the environmental impacts. I don't see in 10 years. Think about it this way.
The environmental impact is only under 1%.
And
yeah, but the environmental impact doesn't make sense to me. It's under 1%.
Under 1% of what?
Of global energy usage or something.
But for this network that can only process 3 transactions per second.
But I mean, what should be the right amount of electricity? Should it be 0.1%? Should it be 5%?
Well, there's other models like proof of stake, which I know they're working out the kinks of. But I feel like in 10 years there will be enough research to be able to replace such an energy inefficient model.
Got it.
I agree with that.
Okay. That makes sense.
And that's I love economic sustainability. It's just the topic that I think about all the time. And from a sustainability standpoint, I don't think Bitcoin is there. Generally, because its main problem is its energy use, and it's huge given the fact that we're in an environment where this is a big topic is climate change.
Yeah.
In 10 years, I think it's going to be a much bigger topic. And then you have, on the other hand, Bitcoin's using the equivalent of 15 million U.S. households. Do you think in 10 years, that's going to be a sustainable model for Bitcoin?
But I guess, like, what does it matter? Like, who cares what people decide to use their electric on? If I want to run a node, I run a node. If I want to run another refrigerator in my house, I run a refrigerator in my house. What does it matter?
Before we get too stuck on this, I feel like we should keep going because we've got 25 to cover here.
We don't have to go through all 25.
I want to go through all 25.
You
I want
want
to keep it quick.
Yes or no's?
Yeah.
Can we agree on Litecoin not being around in 10 years?
I agree on
Okay,
Litecoin
I
not
agree
being
on it.
here. The only reason is
Well,
because
it's up 30% today.
that's fine.
30%.
Good time to get out then.
Let's go down the list. We got Bitcoin.
Sure.
Let's
Wait, no, let's stay with Litecoin.
Litecoin.
No developers, and it's a test net for Bitcoin. Prove me wrong.
And Charlie.
I'm not saying a word on this one. I'm just going to say I don't think it'll be around in 10 years.
Let's keep going down the list.
Bitcoin Cash.
Ooh, that's a tough one. Now, is Bitcoin Cash the Bitcoin we never got?
It's like Christmas game and Santa didn't show up with Bitcoin Cash.
Absolute lob question. What do you guys think?
I don't like Roger Coin.
These remind me of our research days.
Yeah, it does. There's only 2 floors up. We can go back up. My question is, Bitcoin Cash has faster transactions. This is all described in the white paper, and Bitcoin hasn't innovated at all.
Doge has faster transactions.
That's
being
a great
used than
point.
Bitcoin gets.
It's a great point.
Yeah.
Do you think Dogecoin is going to be around in 10 years?
Hell yes. Dogecoin
Purely for its
Dogecoin.
meme or for a
for its
utilization?
meme. That's been
Yeah.
the beauty of Dogecoin.
Yeah.
The fact that it started as a tip bot on Reddit, as like a friendly tip bot. It evolved way past it should have, like in terms of financial value, but it's fantastic as like a.
Do you think there's going to be? Do you think there's ever going to be some form of regulation against mining proof of work?
No, I don't think so.
For the energy reasons?
I could see nation
In
states.
10 years, they're like, all right, you're generating a lot of electricity.
I see nation states getting involved in Bitcoin.
I think if climate change becomes that much of an issue, we're going to outlaw electric usage like anything. That's insane.
But if you're a 500 square foot apartment and you're generating, like $500 electricity bill, sooner or later that I think they would come after you in terms of, hey, you're using too much electricity for some odd reason.
That's Venezuela.
Yeah.
All right, next on the list,
Oh, we've got a yes.
we have Tether. I do not think Tether should exist, and I think we should have MakerDAOs die. And my one and only reason is that Tether will always suffer from transparency reports. When are we getting them? Is there enough money in the bank backing it? How do we know?
That's what makes Tether hysterical, though. Honestly,
How so?
because it has just been this source of contention and drama, and it has been just fascinating to watch. If you're not laughing at like half the shit we're talking about, that's an issue. Like think about Tether and the drama behind Tether. Like when Tether was 88 cents, what were people doing? They're buying the hell out of it, knowing that they could arbitrage.
Yep.
Yeah. Even though it's such a shady kind of like non-transparent thing, there are people that know about it. I don't think it'll exist in 10 years, but just the pure comedy of it is.
Hey, there's $2 billion of it issued. This is $2 billion in cash locked up. Who locked up $2 billion in
Dude,
cash?
imagine the interest on an account like that, considering it's probably not 1-to-1. Oh,
It's actually a good business model. Take the
my
$2 billion,
God.
put it in
And
municipal
lend it-
bonds,
yeah.
lend it out as DAI. Yeah, it's not as DAI as Tether.
just you have enough when someone needs to redeem and be like, all right, you need to wrangle it back, but think about the interest on an account like that. Jesus.
Who wins, Zcash or Monero? Tough question. I think short-term Monero, long-term Zcash. I think Ryan Selkis at Masari put it great in a tweet yesterday, I think it was. He said Monero's, I'm paraphrasing, I don't really remember it. He said Monero's like walking into a busy room and Zcash is like teleporting. And I was crying.
I saw that.
Some followed up with like teleporting being a dangerous thing, like knowing where people are going to go.
Good point.
There was a whole philosophy thing going on there.
Well, who do you think would survive, Monero or Zcash?
I struggle with privacy coins.
Like the
In
overall,
general.
why do we need all of them?
I mean, I can see it being valuable in a maybe a country that doesn't have a sustainable, I guess, underlying currency. But otherwise, I don't really.
All right, let's go to a world where Zcash is easy to use shielded transactions, phone to phone, everybody's doing it. What does that change about the world? Like I could send, like, what's the benefit of that? I could send my,
Would you
mom
use
shield.
Zcash or would you just use Venmo?
Well, that's
and
my
put
question.
the privacy on Venmo.
Venmo's got Zcash integrations.
That's what I mean. Is there really a real use of this?
I don't know. I mean,
I think the technology behind it is fascinating. I think it advances the research in blockchain, but I don't think there's really a great use case for it. Maybe other than a unsustainable country. Like Venezuela.
what do you guys get out of having your transactions private? Like from who? Like protection from who?
Someone following me, knowing my net worth.
Good point.
We're advertising, retargeting, knowing my purchasing. There's a lot of elements. Not being a target is a huge thing with private transactions. That's why cash transactions are.
But do you think you will ever use either Zcash or some equivalent in 10 years for your purchasing?
I want fungibility in Bitcoin to have naturally private transactions.
I don't know if we're ever going to get that.
Well, that's the whole auditing 21 million supply. That's the issue with it. Just can you audit? That's
Good point.
But I want a cryptocurrency with privacy in 10 years. The option, at least, to use it.
All right, I got another question. So with privacy coins, you want to make a donation to a political party, and you love Hillary Clinton and you hate Donald Trump, but you don't want anybody to know because your family is a huge Trump supporter. Would you use Zcash to do that? Is that a use case, or you're just like, whatever? I want to
donate to Hillary in particular, but yeah.
Would you sacrifice the tax write-off of donating it in cash to have your transaction private and have your family know? Do you think that trade-off is worth it?
That's the nuance of who's actually donating. Is it someone who has something at risk to donate to the party or not? And that's the beauty of the opt-in system like that. So you have the option to send something that is as private as Zcash or Monero.
Good point.
It's just the option. It doesn't have to be the de facto currency of the world, but to have that as an option is a very powerful thing. Like, I'm not going to sit here and say, like, fuck yeah, I'm using Venmo in 10 years. Like, if it's that efficient, I use Venmo now.
Now I have to make the episode explicit. That one checkbox on iTunes, Rocco.
Sorry.
You should have the guy say connect.
Stop. We're not talking about legit projects today.
We forgot Tron. I'm very upset we skipped Tron.
Let's go back to Tron.
Let's go back to Tron.
I don't want you to cry about Tron after we leave here.
You know what? Justin Sun's vision, buy a dying, torrenting.
His copy and pasted vision.
And make a lot of money off of it.
What? I guess less about Tron. What do we think about Justin Sun?
Genius. Absolute marketing genius.
I think his Twitter account as an influencer should be worth more than Tron. Does he have like 3 million Twitter followers?
He's got a lot.
And he's convinced a lot of people to drink Kool-Aid.
Yeah, I mean, does that end? When does retail get smart enough to be like, wow, I'm in a scam?
I don't think it does, because when you have an asset like that, and I always think of like unit cost of the asset. Like, Tron was so cheap. Like the XRP thing, it could be the next Bitcoin. It could have the same price as the next Bitcoin, so we're all going to buy it at a penny. And Tron gave that skewed belief to a lot of people, and during the bull run when it ran up ridiculously. So it's like, oh, this is just going to keep going. Yep. And even though it's like, oh, Tron's down, everything's down. Tron's going to make a comeback. There's no rationale, because now we've successfully mixed. We think about the stocks and equities where we can kind of there are ways of valuing these things. There are easy, clear financial models we can create to value stocks and equities. Crypto is so sentiment driven. That plus
entirely sentiment driven.
And you have to understand at least a degree of the technology. And there's a huge learning curve, which could be like brushed to the side in favor of Justin Sun's marketing tactics and a lot of shady marketing.
Well, I mean, don't we do that in stocks today? I mean, I know we have great models for Amazon, but a lot of people buy it because they love Jeff Bezos.
But there is a clear
retail investors.
Yeah, but crypto's all retail right now.
But what's more sentiment driven?
Yeah.
And there's no valuation method for crypto, and there won't be one established for another 10 years.
I completely agree.
So you're saying by the time we could value Bitcoin, we won't have to.
Exactly, yes.
What else is left here? We got NEM.
Oh, God.
No.
Did they run out of money yet?
I know they had the biggest booth at Consensus 2018.
And the guy outside who was saying he wanted his NEM back.
Yeah, well, that's why they're going bankrupt. They have like a week of money left. Let's go to another one that I like on the list. It's number 37 out of the top 25, guys. 0x. I think they're building awesome infrastructure, great community, 20 relayers built on top, but the token is not used in any of the relayers for their decentralized exchange. But governance is coming soon. So what do we think about that? Can we actually add governance to make this thing valuable or not? Because a lot of people are saying, no, get rid of it.
I like the technology. I have no opinion on its governance.
If you could control 0x's platform by owning the tokens, would you care?
If I was a relayer, potentially.
Relayer. Their goal with their token sale was to make tons of stakeholders involved by limiting the amount you could buy in the ICO. Their goal was to make everyone in this room interested in the stakeholder theory of 0x. But I think that's falling apart. What do you guys think?
Nothing makes me. I always go back to Phil Bonello's article on valuing 0x. What's the cost of forking versus the cost of acquiring 51% of the tokens? It is such an interesting thing to think about, and it played out so well with DDEX, which was the most, had the most volume of any relayer. They said, screw this, we don't want to do our governance, we don't want to do our governance token, we're just going to fork contracts. There's no meaningful value, and 0x is a great protocol, don't get me wrong, but I always love, I love stuff like what DDEX did with Hydro, where they're like, okay, we're forking the contracts, we're doing our own thing, DDEX is going to live on, same infrastructure, same, as the end user, you see the same things. You see the same things, nothing's changed. People in the background, oh man, the protocol's there, but the value that's being built on top is what's meaningful for the end user.
I think 0x has great tech. The thing I loved about Hydro when they forked away was the founder said on Jason Choi's podcast, Block Crunch, if we can't make this work the way that they're doing it, we're going right back to 0x. I love that.
And again, if you don't like it, fork off.
Yeah, but that's what I want to happen to Ethereum. I want the feet to the flame. I want that.
Chaos.
Yeah.
I love it. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, but it pushes developers to build. Why doesn't, if Vlad had his own Ethereum chain and Vitalik had his own Ethereum chain, they were all doing their own things, we would have faster innovation.
I think they're leading research though. They have come up with research that have solved a lot of the scalability problems, and it's a hard problem to solve, and they've basically stepped back and said, okay, you know what you're doing. It sounds like it would be very hard for me to jump in and do it better than you.
No, I think Ethereum has the smartest teams in the world by a landslide. But my question is, they've been delaying for so long. I think the whole market expects them to mess this up or delay again, and no one cares about crypto anymore.
That's been the beauty of the Ethereum 2.0 document that I think Amin put out from, or it was someone being funded by means like Moloch DAO, just talking about how many teams are building this thing and how many teams are stepping on each other's toes in terms of definitions, in terms of structure, which is the byproduct of decentralization. There's a funny thing. I think someone has a Twitter called the Ethereum cat herders, just because there are so many people working on this thing that are just not coordinating efficiently. I don't know. As a developer, how do you feel about it?
Yeah, I think something that comes into it is the economic piece for the developers. You see all the time developers, whether it's Ethereum or somewhere else, complaining about being underpaid. There's not a proper structure in place to compensate them, and I think that's a major challenge that has to be addressed because it's very tied to the innovation, and we can't act like it's not.
Yeah, that's an absolute point. Well, I think Fred Wilson's the one that said Ethereum needs a CEO.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what on-chain governance is trying to do. Turn a blockchain into a company.
But that's not effective, at least in my opinion. It's like decentralizing a football team and not having a coach.
I completely agree.
There's no way that team would win.
Yeah, but the players
they wouldn't even beat the Browns.
But the players can make a DAO, and then they'll be able to govern each other.
It's in theory.
Yeah. No, I'm just saying that because I know a lot of people who are advocates of on-chain governance using to liken it to a company.
Sure.
But yeah, I love the football team without a coach analogy.
Yeah,
We're gonna do it, guys.
Yeah, and it sounds really cool, but it's just there are things that are in theory and pragmatic. And
So switching over here, Bitcoin has no CEO, no leaders. There's never been a call to have one.
There's no vision to move away from proof of work.
Great point. So you're saying the lack of innovation means they don't need leaders. They're not building layer 2. Well, they're building layer 2.
There is a light in the sky.
Yeah.
There is a light in the sky. That light in the sky is the deontological view of trustlessness. Do whatever you want on Bitcoin. Don't compromise on trustlessness. But that's the thing. It's the ungovernance of Bitcoin is a little chicken without a head sometimes, but it's shown its resiliency and conservatism over time.
Got it. But does that matter if we can't build real use cases on it? If we can't actually build Lightning on it that works, does that matter?
I mean, it's been working so far nicely.
$2 million in value is nothing, and nobody's been able to answer my questions on how we get this from 2 million to 2 billion in capacity. And I don't think they're going to be able to do it. So how do we, if we can't get there, what's the point of having that?
Well, I mean,
like, shouldn't we have a more customizable layer 1 to be able to enable layer 2s that actually work? We've been building, how long has Blockstream been working on sidechains? 6 years? What have they delivered?
Liquid.
What's Liquid?
It works as their sidechain implementation.
But it's not big. It's not in the market. Merchants aren't using it. We don't have adoption of it. That's my point. It's not easy enough, and it doesn't work if people can't use it. So my point is, what's the point of that safety on layer 1 if we can't get a layer 2 that works? That's my question. And it applies to every chain, not just Bitcoin. Who wants it? Shoot, Tanner.
You knocked it out of the park, Tom.
I asked and answered.
That's what I'm saying about Ethereum. Like, I like these experiments. Let's see if you can get adoption quicker.
Yeah. But there's got to be a point when chains start to die. I just wrote about this. I want chains to start to die.
You mean to zero?
I don't know if there's a way to make them go to zero, because people just stop transacting and then they'll become worthless.
Yeah.
I guess I don't know why they're not at zero, because I don't know who's putting bids on the tokens. If, like, for instance, our chain went bankrupt, but it's still valued at like 0.02 cents. Who's putting bids there?
I'm a disgruntled member of the co-op. But,
yeah, right.
It's probably Vlad. Probably buying up what's left.
Well, I mean, they're working on there's a Casper Labs and that whole side avenue of, like, we're doing our chain now without the same governance. We literally forked out the co-op kind of thing. And I'm wondering if there's something tied to the actual existing Archain asset that we're going to do. Who the hell knows?
It makes sense.
There's always
So they're buying up all the tokens?
information asymmetry suck. That's the bottom line.
Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah.
Especially in this space.
Oh, forget about it.
God,
Yeah.
It's terrible. So let's go on to another one on the list. Everybody's favorite, MakerDAO.
Oh, I love it.
I wrote about it. Tanner, I think you just wrote about it.
I just spent the past 30 hours writing it.
Rocco probably built it. Sam plays around with it.
Love it.
I love MakerDAO.
I think it's a great idea. I think everybody listening is up to speed on what MakerDAO is. Crypto collateralized stablecoin, up to 2.
I think it is the most wrote about topic in the space, aside from Ethereum.
Agreed.
And the thing is, it's interesting to think about when MakerDAO started. It was like really like 2014, 2015.
2015? Yeah.
2015, just that runway, and now that it's finally, and when
Now
people
it's
talk about projects, and like, the thing is, people want these projects to like deliver in like 3 months. MakerDAO, it took them years to even get this, what we're seeing now. Off the
An
ground.
overnight success takes 5 years.
Like that, and that's what I'm saying. It's like people like nowadays with a lot of innovation, it's like, oh, I didn't have this yesterday, but like MakerDAO's been doing this for years. And now that they've launched, it's been like, this is fantastic. Even with Augur took years, but like they launched, and the product is there. It's working as intended, and there it is. But I'm curious what you guys think. Even think about it, like
I think
timelines.
MakerDAO is one of the more innovative and opportunistic projects in the space, and I'll tell you why. I just wrote about this. It's the only use case that it's a borrowing rate that is not tied to the Fed funds rate. And you can't find this anywhere else in the United States. And it creates basically a new grassroots where you can start borrowing capital and using it for certain purposes, like mortgage. So if you want to collateralize your deed on a house and borrow, let's say 150% collateralization, and you borrow that at a 0.5%, that is so much more competitive than the 4.5% you'll get from a mortgage lender.
So Tanner, put this in perspective for us. What is the 4.5 versus 1.5%, or what does the 4.5 versus 0.5% mean on a global scale in terms of dollars? Like how many
in terms of
billions?
dollars, I don't know, but the 4% is economic rent now, and that never used to be. You used to need some difference in alpha to keep the lights on.
But I mean, what does it mean? Like, let's say MakerDAO in 5 years blows up and takes the mortgage industry and demolishes it. What does that mean for lenders, for people? Does this mean more people to buy houses? Does this mean less interest paid? What's the end goal?
There's a lot of very interesting implications with this. Well, if first of all, you would need to build some form of centralized finance organization on top of a MakerDAO or MakerDAO equivalent that can handle multi-collateralization. And what would occur is that interest rates would effectively drop down to 0.5% or maybe 1%, wherever how much the alpha that the centralized organization tags on. And the thing is now the Fed cannot control the entirety of interest rates. So they wouldn't be able to control the interest rates on top of those mortgages, which is a very, very interesting dynamic, but it might be detrimental because it might make the economy overstimulated. Usually lower rates when you want to stimulate the economy and raise them when it's overstimulated and constrain it a little bit. Well,
so hold on, to zoom out here, you're saying that the Federal Reserve loses its control over the economy because money shifts to MakerDAO for loans.
If in theory that works out, the Fed would no longer have control over those loans, or they wouldn't be able to control the interest rate of those loans that are built on top of MakerDAO or the multi-collateral equivalent, because that rate does not tie back to the Fed funds rate.
Got it. So what does that mean? Where does this go wrong? Like, where does the U.S. economy blow up?
That would just mean that bubbles would form easier.
I guess the only pushback for this is, though, MakerDAO is a global system. The Federal Reserve is for America. There's a big difference here. One's global, one's just one country. MakerDAO doesn't care about the U.S.
Sure. Well, first of all, I don't think MakerDAO. I don't think they're capable of doing multi-collateral, anything outside of Ether. But I think if there's a system that could do it, it would be very interesting from a global scale.
Why can't they do multi-collateral?
I'm curious. So yeah. I've thought about this too, where like you have so much risk from all the other assets that are kind of floating around.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think, in your opinion, is? And I'm still yet to figure this out. I always joke about like recursive stablecoins, like using stablecoins to collateralize DAI, but there's extra counterparty risk because it frees it. But I still haven't like kind of reached that point where I'm like, what can safely be another asset?
So let's say a deed to your house. Let's say you have a house that costs, say, $1 million.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you can accomplish that in many ways. You can use that central finance organization to assess the amount of the property value, or you can use last year's tax records to assess the property value, and then you would get a loan, at some collateralization rate. Well, 150% is what you use for Ether right now, but Ether is much, much more volatile than the housing market. It's that you can use that, get the
as collateral.
Yeah, as collateral, maybe get a loan to value of like 80% and pay back your mortgage that way, and then you pay off that 0.5% for the rest of the mortgage, and you would be able to effectively pay down the principal at a significantly faster rate.
So Tanner, I guess the circular thing here though is real estate still that stable if the Federal Reserve loses its control over interest rates? Like, wouldn't the property value shift a little bit?
That's a great point. I think there would be higher volatility.
Got it. Okay.
Do you think there's more cryptocurrency right now? Not even like talking about like kind of real estate value, but like an actual floating cryptocurrency right now, because that's the main talk of like Maker. What?
Bitcoin.
No, I mean I'm saying like even if it's not Bitcoin, I'm saying like BitConnect to collateralize for CDBs. It's stable at $0. But do you like? And what do you think is the closest thing for another asset for like CDBs in terms of cryptocurrency?
To collateralize for a stable value is what you're saying. Well,
I don't think it matters. I think you can have any coin as long as you get the collateralization ratio right.
I guess I feel like different coin with different rates.
Right.
Like we might put XRP at 2,000% collateralization ratio just in case.
Ring, who's calling its margin?
I'm sure Brad will figure out a way. We'll have another idea. So what else should we discuss, guys? What's next?
Didn't we have this whole list, right?
Well, I guess MakerDAO, I have another question, is we're starting to hit the curve where we're using the infrastructure we already built to build actual use cases, and we're mixing and matching them. So Veal launched, and that's 0x, Ethereum.
Augur. 0x and Augur.
How did I mess that one up?
It's
0x, Augur, and Ethereum, right?
Yeah, because you got Augur to build providing interface with fictions markets, and then you're using 0x to trade derivatives off that market.
Got it. So are we hitting the curve where we've already built enough infrastructure, and we could start piecing it together to build applications. Are we hitting that, or is Veal a one-off? What do we think?
I think we're at a good start. I think that during the 2017 bubble, if you will, that provided a lot of funds to help build this infrastructure. Unfortunately, I think a lot of that money went to terrible projects, and I don't think as much money went to actually building out that infrastructure, which is an unfortunate thing. But the thing unique about crypto is it was a bubble that had an early liquidity event enable it to bubble it up. So usually, I don't know if you've ever seen the curve, but it's like an S curve that eventually we start building infrastructure when there's basically zero talk about the industry. And I think we're kind of at that very, very quiet point. However, since there was such an early liquidity event, already having some people build some of this infrastructure, I think that event where there's going to be a quiet period is going to be a shorter event than traditional technology trends.
Got it. That makes a lot of sense. I guess another thing that I think about, though, with building apps is, we're using private chains for a lot of this stuff. Private blockchains have gotten a ton of press, I think, just because traditional Wall Street feels left out and we want public companies to play around with here. What do you guys think about private blockchains? Is there actually a place for AWS and Microsoft to play in space?
Yeah. I mean, I personally, I can't talk much about it, but I've worked on some projects where I felt like just wouldn't make sense on Ethereum, and it's all about the use case, And there's just some use cases that it definitely makes sense to use a private blockchain.
Enterprises they don't want to play in the public sandbox. They want permission chains. Creating these consortia is a very incredible thing. And also having that kind of universal backend for the future is a big future vision of permission chains that can all interoperate. You get scenarios where people are using permission chains and eventually notarize the public chains.
Yeah.
But I think there is a place for permission chains in the enterprise space.
Do you think we can connect permission chains to, let's say, Ethereum as like a state?
100%.
State storage.
Yeah. Ethereum could be that public chain that they anchor to.
Do you think Ethereum, sort of like how Bitcoin was changing their theme from being the global currency to being a store of value, do you think Ethereum could ever change its theme from being the world computer to being the state storage?
It was hard for you to say theme and not story or narrative.
Sure, narrative.
Yeah, I think that could be it. Eventually, if whatever accrues the most value over time. If that ends up doing it, especially if you have larger whales in the room playing around in that sandbox, then yeah.
So why can't we use AWS for scale, store everything on Ethereum, and forget about layer 2 scale?
We'll just stay on Ethereum. Making sure for auditing capabilities.
So why don't we do that? Why doesn't any team say, let's scale on AWS? And
I think there are.
It's happening in the enterprise side if you want to eventually write that state to Ethereum.
Got it. So even if layer 2 fails, we always have that.
Yeah, and I've seen a lot of projects like that I've spoken to that are doing that. They're just not out there in the public yet.
Got it. That makes a lot of sense. So you guys see real value of private chains. I always have trouble seeing it.
You're going to talking about Pantheon, what I guess this just recently released. It's that element of here's your sandbox, and it's got that connection out to the public side. If you want to, start. I
always thought the issue was, though, when you have multiple companies on these private chains, there always has to be like a decision on who's head honcho, who's making the decisions. I always thought that was the main issue for a lot of these companies.
What's the idea of the consortium model?
Right.
Yeah, I guess that makes sense.
Who could be you have a Hyperledger instance, for example, and here are multiple validators across multiple members of the consortium.
Makes sense. So I guess moving on, how do we get traditional hedge funds involved in the space, guys? How do we get How do we get banks, hedge funds, FAs?
Tokenize the world.
I think it might be an ETF, but I don't know.
ETF will be mostly retail.
But it is a good segue to sell institutions up to.
Yeah. The only problem is, and I tell this is basically what I tell to everyone in terms of institutional adoption. I can't imagine a portfolio manager approaching their investment committee and says, hey, we should buy Ethereum. An investment committee says, okay, what's your thesis? And he says, well,
check out this Medium post.
This anonymous guy on Twitter told me to buy.
Exactly. There's no valuation method for them to, really pitch to their investment committee to say, hey, we should buy this. And that's why there won't be any institutional investors into this space in the near term.
We got to zoom out, though. Traditional hedge funds are dying. So their traditional investment committees are dying. They have to adapt. They have to evolve. Maybe the crypto funds don't have investment committees.
Your time's up, old man.
Love the Rick and Morty reference.
But I think that would just add more risk to the model than really solve the model. It's not necessarily them of being the old man. It's more so that just doesn't really help anything.
So every crypto fund puts out this boilerplate research piece that I see from every single fund. And it is, if you had 1% of your portfolio in Bitcoin over the last 5 years, your returns would have been 5 times better than if you left it in our normal portfolio with us. I think that doesn't make any sense. Who was investing 1% of their portfolio in Bitcoin 5 years ago?
When I worked in trading, we would always have to put these compliance like disclosures at the bottom, and it doesn't matter what document we put in, you would always have to put past performance is not indicative of future results.
Yep.
And it doesn't matter what document it is. And I think that's an exact use case here.
Yeah.
It really is. That, I mean, I'm not speaking from just like, oh, I love compliance. But I think that's really applicable here. Just because it grew by X% doesn't mean in the next few years it's going to be sustainable at that point.
So we talk a lot about Bitcoin and the issues, and I think it's good that we talk about them because we have to. A good friend of mine, Tim McDonald, brought up a point to me. He said, if you can't get somebody to buy Bitcoin, how the hell are you going to convince them to buy Ethereum or other coins? And I thought that was a great point because Bitcoin is the holy grail here. So I guess the question is, do you guys see us hitting a curve where we could say, hey, Bitcoin's cool and everything, but skip that, come into this currency as an on-ramp instead? I guess that's the question. Like, do you have to convince people to love Bitcoin to be able to buy?
I think they'll love the platform idea more than a unsustainable support proof of work viewpoint, store value.
Let's take this on the flip side. Let's say Ethereum fails with Serenity.
Me and Tanner get into a fist fight after this.
I'm not turning the camera off.
Yeah, you haven't said much. You have an argument here. You know, I want to feel the heat, Rocco.
I can definitely add something. When I explain Ethereum to people, I do it all the time, and I always start out by explaining how Bitcoin works, and then using it as a foray into explaining Ethereum. And I've found that that's the only way for Ethereum to make sense to people. But there was never a reason for them to say, "Oh, well, that means I must buy Bitcoin to want to buy Ethereum," right? So I use Bitcoin as, again, like a basic or a basis to then explain Ethereum to people. But
that's now. What if in the future there are some apps that are being built out, and you see Bitcoin, it's just kind of like doing its thing. It's sort of like the internet. Would we have to explain to people how the internet works? No, you just use it. You just interact with the user interface.
Yeah, in the
very
future,
simple.
absolutely.
But if you tell people, hey, you use the Ethereum apps on a daily basis for these reasons, and then you have to explain Bitcoin first,
right?
They'll be like, okay, I get the value of Ethereum, but all right, now you have to explain the technology behind Bitcoin.
Right.
So maybe, I don't know, I'm just looking at it from a different perspective.
No, I see on that. I think it's like you're saying now, but like in the future, definitely not. Like, I don't think that I'm going to have to keep doing this for the next 5 years.
Yeah. You don't want a job in 5 years? Come on. You're getting good at it. So let's move on to something I almost forgot about, the TCR party, Rocco.
Oh, my God.
I think I might have gotten kicked out of it, but I don't think many people on here know what it is, so we have to give an introduction to what it is. If they haven't seen the CoinDesk article that came out today, tell us what TCR Party is.
TCR Party is a token curated registry, and for listeners at home who aren't sure what that is, imagine the Princeton Review's top 100 colleges curated by a bunch of troll token holders instead of a board. It's essentially a list of 100 Twitter handles that you feel, or whoever the token holders feel, is the end-all to be-all list of the best accounts on crypto Twitter. And this registry is controlled by token holders. You could be a user. By being a user, you can nominate people to this list. You could challenge existing list members, or you could vote on the challenges or nominations, or challenges to the nominations. And so far, it's been good. Where two things are testing. We feel that these lists end up becoming big popularity contests because it is very early in this whole kind of cryptocurrency experiment. That subjectivity kind of reigns free in these list curations. But our other thing, and even the bigger driving point for us, is can we abstract, blockchains and token systems behind existing UXs that millions of people use? So the whole thing is built through Twitter with 2 bots. One Twitter bot acts as a multi-sig wallet for users, where you just tell the bot what to do with the tokens. The bot grants you the tokens. You do all your functions through this one bot, and this one bot's all announcing challenges and gives you every transaction hash once the actual transaction's been completed, whether you're challenging someone, whether you're voting someone, whatever it is. And the other bot acts as the curation machine, retweeting everyone that's actually on the list to publicly curate it to Twitter.
That's awesome. So what's the value? So it's TCR Party VIP on Twitter. That's the username.
Yeah, and if anyone, it's TCR.party.
Yep.
I saw Elon Musk is on it. Vitalik's on it.
Vitalik's on it. Jack was on it at some point. They're trying to nominate some celebrities.
I think you're being challenged right now.
I'm being challenged right now. I gotta go vote for myself, but
So tell us how the value. Or let's walk through the process a little bit. Say I want to nominate somebody to be on the list.
Yep.
I think that Kyle Samani at Multicoin should be on the list.
Ryan tried, and
Ryan failed.
Ryan failed,
unfortunately. Hope he still has a job.
So the process. So you'd start by just saying out publicly, "Hey, TCR Party VIP, let's party," in a public tweet. You'll then interface with a bot. You'll ask some questions to prevent spam and people setting up multiple accounts and just botting it. And then you just tell the bot or publicly tweet, nominate, or at TCR Party VIP if you're doing publicly, or in the DM, just you don't have to add it. Nominate at Kyle Samani. And then it will just send the transaction over to Rinkbig, and he'll be up for 12. If he doesn't get challenged in 12 hours, he's on it. If he gets challenged, then the voting begins.
How does he get on the list though if the list is filled?
Oh, you have to wait till someone gets kicked off. So if there's 100 people either on the list or in challenge, someone's got to get kicked before the next nomination can come in.
So he's in challenge, and let's say you got 100 people on the list, and Kyle doesn't get challenged. What happens? Is he on a waiting list until somebody leaves? And
you literally can't. If there's 100 names in flux, you can't nominate.
Gotcha.
Until it says, "Hey, this person," the bot will tweet, someone's been kicked off the list. Then all of a sudden, if you're the first one to catch it, you can then put that nomination in.
So what is the value here of abstracting away blockchain and letting people interact with crypto while using a really easy-to-use interface like Twitter? What's the value of that?
There's two stuff. The first big thing is everyone's talking about the UI UX problem. People interface with these systems. We talked about MakerDAO earlier. Got to know how to set up MetaMask. You got to know how to get acquire Ethereum somehow. You got to know how to set up a CDP. You got to use these tools that are getting easier to use, but it's not something the average Joe, your grandmother, is going to go open up a CDP. This experiment especially is how do you abstract everything away into an application people use millions of people use multiple times a day, where you're not even thinking about the blockchain, but you can verify every transaction because it gives you the hash. So if you really want to see did this actually happen on this testnet or eventually on mainnet, here's the hash, go see the transaction in action. Got it. So and even non-crypto people can literally sign up and not have to think about crypto wallets, not have to think about sending transactions out, because all you're doing is just telling the bot what to do.
So this system lives on even if Twitter dies. I mean, I know it'll be
you can literally interface with the contracts, set up a different UX for it. The contracts are still there on Rinkbig. So even if Twitter dies, the bots are just handling it for now, but the multi-sigs are still set up on the actual network and everything. We could build in the UX. The funny thing is we ran into 2 problems, just as a result of using these systems. One was an issue with the testnet. The other was with Twitter getting rid of our API access temporarily. No. So playing within their means, but still using them as a UX has been a weird.
That's wild, because Jack really took out that XRP army with such great speed.
Oh yeah, he's been doing great on that.
Yeah, he's been doing so well with that. So the value of this list is a popular concept now. It's fun and everything, but it seems to me that it could be massively valuable if this becomes the top 100 people to follow, and everybody that wants to be involved with crypto goes to this list and follows them. It could be a huge influencer.
Yeah, it's either follow the entire list, or if you see people are value on it, or follow the actual bot that retweets it. One of the bots is the actual curation machine, so you could literally follow this one bot and have those 100 accounts be in your feed.
Yeah.
Yeah, because the bot doesn't tweet at all. The bot just retweets those accounts.
So what does this mean for beyond TCR Party and people in crypto? Can I have what's the value of a token a TCR in the investment community? What if I have the top 100 investors? That's valuable.
Yeah, and the idea is eventually we might box this up and try to adapt it to something like that, where the UX again is abstracted and there's ways of doing it that'll make it easy for anyone to kind of curate or have a set amount of curators.
So the annoying question for you, Rocco.
Yes.
When do these tokens go on a exchange, or can they?
These are testnet tokens. We may deploy in the future with mainnet tokens. I mean, There's a faucet. It's inflationary. We're just giving them away. There's no sale. There's no.
If you want to give me more, I think I'm out. So
no, it's all auditable.
Send them over.
Listen, man. We thought about it. We're like, wait, it's all auditable. That's the beauty of it. Like, we can't give out more tokens and secretly like plug someone with 1 million tokens because it's all still on record.
Gotcha.
If anyone wants to check if the wallets are still intact or someone with like maliciously granted millions of tokens, go audit it.
What do you have to do to get this on the mainnet? Do you need like funding or?
We're thinking about now. We don't need funding or anything. We're thinking about how to architect it to be not as costly, because every time we send transactions out, it's costing us ring fee ETH, which is not, you could hit a faucet and get ring fee ETH. So we're thinking about like a sidechain architecture to actually set up on mainnet, have it run on a sidechain, eventually notarize to main chain, so the costs are very low on our end because it's the centralization trade-off there. This is also an experiment of a decentralization versus centralization trade-off.
But I mean, it's fun. Like, I can challenge whoever I want. I can nominate whoever I want, which is fun within Twitter. But if I had to pay gas fees on the main Ethereum, I might think a little bit more about.
Exactly.
Yeah. But I feel like it might make for a better. Well, I don't know if it would make for a better list. I have free reign to do whatever I want. That's
the crypto economics that we can't really test in how we have it now. That's a big thing. It's like you have TCRs in decentralized environments, so you have like ad chain, you have foam. I guess Masari in the future, but this is a very different. Like, it's harder to test those crypto economic assumptions because there is no dollar value pegged to it. It's not user gas costs on their end. So we're just kind of testing the centralization constraints versus eventually maybe slowly decentralizing it, seeing where the pain points are, and just iterating research over time.
I gotta ask, how did you come up with the idea?
Oh my God. Our team was not too keen on TCRs. We knew they were like subjective. And then like kind of like a shower thought scenario, I'm like, what's the flame war that crypto usually falls into, and it's Twitter. So what if we had like a Twitter curated registry, which eventually just evolved into this idea of a party? It was a joke.
Yeah.
But it just became TCR party, and then it was like,
when did you actually launch it? Because it's grown really fast.
A couple days ago. That's it, and we just got our first rest it now. Yeah. But listen, I gotta give it to Steve, man, on my team, who just friggin' built the whole thing. He's hats off to him. Like,
what's Steve's last name again?
Gattuso.
Steve Gattuso.
Yeah. So. But he's been excellent at engineering the entire idea from start to finish. I worked out the product side with Jacob, who I was on with on the token design chat we had.
Yes, I've had Rocco on the podcast before with Jacob.
Yeah, so we were mostly on the product side, and then Steve was building the whole thing. And it's been great to kind of also play around with TCRs too as a team to kind of build it out and build our own version and see it in action.
I mean, there's a lot of use cases for this beyond popularity contests.
Yeah, completely.
You can implement this in a company, and you can see in real time who's valuable, who's not valuable.
Yeah, that's exactly what we're thinking about, like boxing it up for the future, but that's obviously future iteration.
Equity research, they could put all the analysts on instead of voting, we could go with TCR.
You use Twitter and equity research.
Oh no, we're not allowed to use anything. So back to closing questions, and then I want your Twitter handles. What's the strongest held belief you have in crypto that the majority of people would not agree with? Actually, I'm going to rephrase this because I liked his tweet. I don't remember if it was Ari Paul or somebody else. What belief in crypto would you lose half your followers for? I hate that I forget who tweeted it.
I don't think Bitcoin's sustainable.
Yeah, that was mine.
You'd lose half your followers for that.
Well, that's interesting because I don't think I have a lot of Bitcoin maximalists as followers, but
true.
Good point.
I did find out that I looked at my Twitter analytics, and the same amount of people like tech news as they do dogs in my So I think recently I just put a picture of a dog. You guys give the people what they want.
Rocco, what would you lose half your followers for?
The fact that all these public chains are still just an experiment, or just a science experiment that can potentially provide tremendous value in the future. But we still have to be very cautious about when we interact with and use these things.
Got it. So you guys don't think crypto's over in this bear market we're at? I mean, I certainly don't.
I think it could consolidate.
Yeah, I think it should consolidate.
I don't know who's bidding at 0.02% to 0.02 cents, but there will always be someone bidding at something.
Yeah. Well, it's been a great episode. Where can everybody follow each of you? What's all your Twitter handles? Start with you, Tanner.
TEHOBAN1.
You couldn't just think of like a fun word or something?
You're right. Maybe I should change it. TE Hoban at 1.
Rocco's got the hardest one.
I know it's Obstropolis, OBSTROPOLOS.
Where'd you get that?
It's actually a funny story. In a previous life, meaning only.
We're talking about multiple timelines here. Might as well go to other worlds.
Yeah. In a previous life, my background's in modernist literature. I don't have a financial background or a technological background.
Well, no, I got that from your last post because I had to read it like 4 times.
Yeah, I'm a big James Joyce guy.
Not a bad thing. It was a great report.
Ulysses and Finnegan's Wake were like what I wrote mostly on in college. And Obstropolous, it's one of Joyce's portmanteaus, kind of his like squished together words, meaning like a man with an upturned grin. And I thought it was a funny word, and I just like, that'll be my.
That is so beyond like.
It's relatable only to you.
That's what I love about it. I was like,
I guess it's better than Tiki Hoban 1.
That's a tough act.
Yeah, I'll never get Rocco except for on Venmo.
Rocco's Modern Life.
That's true, but I'm saying like at Rocco. Like I wish.
Oh yeah,
that'd be awesome. But for now, it's Obstropolous. Just the own.
How about PP?
I do have Rocco on people. I do.
Sam, Twitter?
Sam C621.
That's
Simple.
easy.
Yeah.
Well, he's just put you guys to shame.
Well, Tom, what's yours?
Shaughnessy 119. 119, come on. You changed my birthday overnight.
Oh, that's true.
I'm not inviting you next year.
You're not invited to the TCR party.
Thanks for tuning in, everybody.